Hello everybody and welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Christian Skoggs and Glicked is finally here. Yay! Now if you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, basically Wicked and Gladiator 2 both released on the same weekend. This now appears to be a trend in Hollywood, with Barbie and Oppenheimer both releasing on the same weekend last year, and having that phenomenon be titled Barbenheimer. Now I honestly think this is a great idea and something that could seriously save the film industry. I always thought that in order to get people back into the theater, you gotta give them a reason to come back in the first place. Obviously, making good movies will help with this, but pairing them together creates an event for people to look forward to. I remember with Barbenheimer, people were dressed up and extremely enthusiastic about the films that they were going to see. They went on to be highly successful, with both of them being in the top 3 highest grossing movies of the year, both of them being nominated for Best Picture, and one of them even winning. And even though these films were massively different and targeted to a different demographic, people went out and saw both of them. In the case of Gladiator 2 and Wicked, both were highly anticipated, and both have been massive hits at the box office so far. I was able to see both movies back to back, one day after the other, literally at the same theater and at the same time, and both times that same IMAX theater was completely sold out. It was honestly a really great experience, and it reminds me that people do in fact want to go to the movies, if you give them a reason to. Let's go in the order I saw these in. Wicked was directed by John M. Chu. He did In the Heights in 2021, Crazy Rich Asians, the Justin Bieber documentary, and one of the G.I. Joe movies. I was really impressed with his work on In the Heights, and it was actually one of my favorite movies of 2021. It didn't do that well at the box office though, and it didn't receive any Oscar buzz whatsoever. It was a shame because I really felt like that film had a lot to offer, and I really thought it was exceptional. Hearing he was directing the Wicked movie was definitely reassuring, but I still didn't know how it was going to be. I thought the trailers were okay, but I didn't think they really did a lot for the actual movie. I felt like it was hiding a lot of their musical numbers, which you guys know I am really not a fan of, and I wasn't sure how splitting this story into 2 parts was going to go. For the 2 people who have never heard of Wicked, this movie is an adaptation of the beloved Broadway musical. It's a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, and it follows the story of Elphaba and Glinda, who would both go on to be the wicked and good witches that we see in that original movie. They both attend Shiz University and are forced to room together, which neither are thrilled with. Elphaba, played by Cynthia Erivo, has green skin, which makes her an outcast amongst her peers, and Glinda, played by Ariana Grande, is the seemingly perfect popular girl that everybody loves. As Elphaba attends private sessions with one of the instructors, Madame Morrible, played by Michelle Yeoh, she does eventually develop a friendship with Glinda. But once she has an opportunity to meet the wizard, played by Jeff Goldblum, things rapidly begin to change, which sets our characters into motion onto their paths. As I already mentioned, this is part 1 of a 2-part movie, which the studio would prefer you do not know about, as part 1 is not seen in the title on the poster, but instead on the actual title card for the movie. I guess studios now believe that having part 1 in the title of a movie is a kiss of death, so it's likely that they're doing everything they can to try to hide that fact from you, so you'll still go see this. I guess the argument here is that audiences will think that it's not a complete story, so why bother going to see it? We can just stream it at home. I really hate when studios do this though. It shows that they don't respect the audience enough to let them make their own informed decisions on whether to see a film or not, and would gladly trick them into seeing a movie if they had the opportunity to. Fortunately for this movie, it's going to make a ton of money, so maybe it being split into 2 parts ended up working out in the end. You really get a sense that they gave themselves enough time to breathe with the story, and we were really able to understand each of the character motivations very well. Also, none of the songs were cut out here, so you definitely won't be disappointed if you are a fan of the original. Now, I haven't seen the Wicked stage musical, but I'm hoping to do so soon. I really like what I saw here though, and can definitely understand what people see with this source material. This was a really good movie, and you could tell that everyone on board really cared about making this a great experience for the audience. This movie is well directed, the performances are strong, the production values are mostly solid, and yeah, the songs are really, really good. John M. Chu has found a way to perfectly direct each of these musical numbers, and it's clear that he really knows his shit when it comes to making a movie like this. It's notoriously very difficult to make a good adaptation of a Broadway musical for the silver screen. A lot of films just don't understand how to utilize the medium to their advantage, and it ultimately doesn't end up working out for them. The good news here is that this stage musical worked really well on the big screen. A lot of the singing in this film was done live, which really helped to showcase the incredible vocal talent from both Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. They both also gave some really incredible performances and fit really well with their characters. It Revo has an amazing singing voice, and it really shines in Defying Gravity, where she's able to showcase some amazing range. That whole sequence in general is phenomenal, and really ends the movie on a high note. Ariana Grande practically steals the show, and I think she has a really strong chance of snatching the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her work here. She also has really great comedic timing, which is something we got to see in Victorious, but she also pulls off the dramatic elements really well too. I was really happy to see that this movie was mostly done practically and that limited CG was used in the making of it. All the production design was really incredible, and it's some of the best I've seen all year. The rotating set in the Dancing Through Life sequence was very fun and creative. There's a several-ton train that they built exclusively for this movie that looked really nice, and Emerald City looks really incredible once they do get there. Now, I don't think all of the production elements are great. I think the lighting was kind of ugly, and I was disappointed that it wasn't nearly as dynamic as it could have been. Sure, there's some sequences like in Popular or in One Short Day where the lighting goes off the walls, but the rest of the film is kind of gray and flat. John M. Chu himself defended this decision by stating that he wanted to make the world of Oz feel like a real place, and thus took away the vibrant colors in the film, but I still feel like that's kind of a bullshit answer. Oz is a fictional world. The whole point is that it's supposed to look dreamlike. It's unclear if these issues will all be fixed in part 2, maybe he'll double down on this decision. But yeah, I don't know. To me, this feels like when Andy Muschietti was trying to defend the bad CGI in The Flash by saying it was intentionally supposed to look rubbery. No, you don't understand, guys. My movie looks like shit on purpose. It's hard when you're defending a movie's flaws during its marketing campaign. You don't want to admit that your movie is flawed in any way, but you also have to acknowledge the criticism that some are levying in these interviews. All we can hope for in instances like this is that the director can take that criticism and use it to improve the quality of their next film. We'll see what he does with the next one. I also thought the CG was pretty noticeable whenever it was used. Like, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it certainly could have been better. Overall, I found this movie to be pretty stellar. I'm excited for others to see it, and I hope that it goes on to be a huge hit. I feel like I'm in a year-long intermission now, and I can't wait to see part 2. As for my rating, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. Definitely a must-see. Gladiator 2 was directed by Ridley Scott and is a sequel to the iconic first installment from the year 2000. It stars Paul Mescal as Lucius, the young child from the first film, and follows his story from captivity following an invasion in his home in Numidia. His wife is killed in combat, and he seeks vengeance against the Roman Empire, particularly against General Cassius, played by Pedro Pascal. He eventually is bought as a gladiator by Macrinus, played by Denzel Washington, who uses Lucius's anger and the unrest in Rome as a way to position himself towards power. Now, I like the first Gladiator, but I definitely don't think it deserves the amount of acclaim that it seemed to receive at the time it came out. I mean, this movie was so well regarded that it went on to win, yes, win, Best Picture at the 2001 Academy Awards. Now, I don't think this one will receive the same amount of love at this year's awards ceremony, but I think it will do quite well financially. It's about on the same level as the first. It's a really fun and exciting movie with a substantial amount of time devoted to the characters and the conflict they find themselves in. Unlike the first one though, this one had more epic storytelling goals in mind. What I mean by that is that while the first one is more of a personal revenge story with merely Maximus's life and dignity at stake, here the whole empire is essentially at stake. They're currently under the rule of Emperors Geta and Caracalla, played by Joseph Quinn and Fred Hetchinger, and you get a sense of the conditions that they could possibly be living under just by seeing how these two carry themselves. They're childish, immature, and clearly not up for the task of leading an empire. Much like with Commodus in the first one, their abrasive personality provides a strong representation of the larger problems at hand facing Rome, and it gives you a compelling villain to root against. Paul Mescal really sells himself as a compelling lead, and I'm genuinely excited to see what he does next. He gets a lot of time to shine, and he looks great in these battle sequences. Denzel Washington gives possibly one of the best performances of the whole year, and I really found his character to be super engaging. He's a very conniving and power-hungry individual who uses any and all connections he has to carry him to his goal of taking over Rome. His strength is being able to gain people's trust and using that to his benefit. He's constantly talking to other people, pledging allegiance to them, only to turn on them in a private conversation merely in a matter of minutes. The action scenes themselves are some of the best I've seen all year. Especially in IMAX, they were extremely riveting and constantly kept me locked in. Some have criticized some of these action sequences for being over the top, and sure, I can understand that. One of the first matches we see in the Coliseum has a guy riding a giant rhino that charges at other contestants. Another has a naval battle with sharks swimming inside the water. And another sees Lucius wrestling a giant baboon. I'm not really going into this movie with the hopes of experiencing something that's historically accurate, so I really don't mind these insane concepts for action sequences. It's all very fun and entertaining to me, and I truthfully can't complain if I'm enjoying what I'm watching. If the action scenes weren't well made, then sure, I'd have a bone to pick with the ridiculous nature of it all, but I thought it was great, and as such, I don't really have any notes regarding it. Sometimes the CG on the animals looks a little fake, but I think it was alright overall. The main issue I have with this film is I think it follows the first film story a little too closely. It basically follows the same structure beat by beat for the first half of it, which I guess isn't bad, but it also shows me that this film doesn't really know what else to do narratively. It wasn't until the second half where I think the narrative begins to really come into its own and really shine. Some will also be annoyed at the callbacks to the original. I guess it didn't bother me so much only because I've only seen the original movie once and I'm not really that nostalgic for it. I don't know. I guess the callbacks made sense given the characters' relationships to the events of the first film, but I can definitely see it bugging other people a lot more out there. I think the pacing is also just kind of all over the place. Sometimes it moves too slow, and sometimes it moves too fast. The goals and motivations of the characters change very quickly, and the film really doesn't give you enough time to see that transition play out in a cohesive way. Part of the reason for this is because the film has so much to do that it truthfully can't fit everything into a singular story. But I don't know, even with that, there's certainly other ways it could have altered the narrative to make certain developments feel a little bit more earned. I remember Napoleon, also directed by Ridley Scott, having similar issues last year, so I don't know, maybe a longer cut of this could help. But I also feel like this movie kind of got dragged out in some scenes. Like maybe I was just tired the day I went to see it, but it felt like this one really ran long, which isn't great. With that being said, I was never bored, just sometimes wondering where things were going. I think I'm overall more in the positive camp for this film than most critics are at the moment. I really found this to be an engaging watch and found much of the action to be really incredible. Even though this film presents itself as a more prestigious action flick, it's really not. It's just a fun and entertaining time, and you know what? That's all it really needs to be. I think it would definitely help to see the first one, but you probably don't need to, I suppose. It's a pretty straightforward narrative, so I think most people will be able to get on board with this regardless of if they've seen the first one or not. As for my rating, it's somewhere between a 7 and 8 out of 10. I don't think it's perfect, but this film has some of the best action I've seen all year, and it's hard to deny the entertainment value this has to offer. And those are my thoughts on Gladiator 2 and Wicked. It's definitely very exciting to be living in a time like this, and I hope you get to see both of them. Anyways, hope you're all doing okay out there, and until next time.